Hello and welcome back to the Confident Dance Teacher. This is our educational series where we are focusing on empowering educators to inspire, lead, and transform the world of dance. Today we have Mariah-Jane Thies, and she's going to talk to us about how she began the Radiant Dance Teacher, her extensive background, and all the fabulous things that she's put together for just educators in the dance world, and to share some of that knowledge with you guys. So thank you for being here with us. I love that you've given us this opportunity to get to know you a little bit. And that's exactly where I want to start. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this place of beginning the Radiant Dance Teacher.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor, and I'm thrilled to be able to share it with more people. So, thank you for that. So, my background, well, it's a little bit unusual. I did start dancing when I was really young. I have an older sister, 2 years older, and I honestly don't remember whether it was like mom or dad's idea to put us in dance. But when she wanted to go into dance, I tagged along. So, I did a little ballet and tap, and I remember enjoying it. But both my sister and I were super intrigued with the live musician we had there. So this was back in the mid 70s. So there was a live pianist there, and I guess the occasional records. And I just remember, I think it was the bonus of actually having my class start. Like I was the first class of the day. So we, got let in 5, 10 minutes early or whatever because she was getting settled. And we'd always be over there talking to the piano player. So not soon after that, we got lessons with that piano player. So I started taking piano lessons and enjoyed that as well. Then at 10 years old, jumping rope on the playground, recess time, having a good time, rope caught my ankle and I didn't just twist my ankle, I jumped on it. And it was the very definition of a traumatic ankle injury. And it took me out of dance for a long time. It took me like almost a year to be able to walk properly. And unbeknownst to me, I'd crushed the bone and it just anyway, it's been a defining part of my life actually for all of the learning that I did. But what it meant is that I got out of dance for a while. And then I moved into grade 6 and joined band and became more academic. And dance had kind of fallen away until at 15, the piano teacher that I had, that I first met in my little young life as a ballet dancer, she retired and said, I think you've got the skills you can take over now as
Hmm.
the studio accompanist. So that's what
Wow.
I did. I'm 15 years old, going to school, having well, I guess it's a part-time job, but it was 5 days a week playing piano for the dance studio.
Wow. As
And
a teenager,
as a teenager, yeah, it was
that's
actually
a
the
lot.
funny part was when I got my finger broken in the first day of basketball, the ball went back and I broke my finger. So I had to relearn all the music with my finger in a splint, but I carried on. And I loved it. It was a little challenging when they went from one syllabus to the other, and I had daily practice of learning the music because it had been a major step up in the complexity of the music. But I did it. But the part that's really relevant is not just, oh, yeah, I've got a music background, but that I spent years, mostly between 15 and 18, 5 days a week, sitting in a dance studio watching the dance teacher teach all ages every day and seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work, watching the progressions, watching everything to do with it. And I was, of course, really intrigued with the dancers and eventually became, this person that said, I think you need to find another pianist because I want to start dancing again.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
I transitioned back bit by bit. Yeah. And I was also super lucky that we had a dance program actually at our high school, which was back then and now the mid 80s was super rare. So I just
Hmm.
started transitioning over. And I think by the time I was, mid 18 years old or so, I stopped playing piano and was just dancing full time. But it really gave me a head start on the pedagogy side of things. And
Yes.
it's interesting to wonder, you never know what your background really brings you to because you don't have a do-over to do a different path, right?
Right.
I always felt like I wanted to be a teacher, and maybe those formative times being in the studio watching the teaching, it was different than me getting the performance bug. I did love performing, but I played teacher with my best friend who also became a teacher. I never played house. Something about me always wanted to be a teacher. And I really
That's
got that.
awesome.
Yeah. And then I managed to go to, again, I was the last of the graduates in a dance teacher program out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And boom, my teaching career began and became RAD ballet certified. So started entering kids for exams, but I also did modern and jazz and musical theater and some tap. I've just never been much of a hip hop person. I don't, not quite
So
cool
how
enough.
old were you?
I went to college and graduated. I think I was 23 when I graduated, and then just started boom right into the studios. And then
Yeah.
it became really clear that I was doing things differently
Hmm.
to the degree that I'm having conflict with the studio owners. Like not, but where they're
Sure,
like,
sure.
you need to do it this way. And so while I would still prepare them for the recital and the exams and the competitions, my methods were different.
Hmm.
I didn't want to follow what even back in 95, I called old school. I didn't want to follow that. It never
Interesting.
sat right with my body or my mind or my spirit. It didn't, especially in ballet. And so at 29, I started my own dance studio because I'm like, I'm going to do it my way.
Right.
Yeah. And so I did. You could say I ran that experiment for 10 years and I had my own dance studio for 10 years. And that's really where I honed a lot of my ideas, my ideals, my ideology, all that stuff got honed because I had the great fortune of having students that I had for an entire 10 years and
Right.
watch them grow. Yeah,
Yeah. And that's what they say it takes to become a dancer. It's like a professional dancer
absolutely.
is 10 years.
And maybe the same thing for a dance teacher, right? Where you're just
Yeah.
really able to, well, because you get to watch that growth. What I really started to make my methodology sort of be about was if I'm seeing a 15-year-old have a certain challenge,
Hmm.
what might I have said to them at 5, 6, 7 years old that set them off this on this path? So if a
Hmm.
15-year-old has a hip that's clicking, yeah, it's the problem for that current 15-year-old, and I'm going to help them. But when we're finding a root cause, it also means we got to go back and got to go back. And
Backtrack. Yes.
yeah, and I really started to look at going, what might a dance teacher, myself and others, be saying to that 6-year-old that's embedding a movement pattern that's ultimately going to end up there?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I had so much ability to be able to just backwards plan, not just in one class, but like a 10-year backwards plan.
Yes.
And I
That's
really got
great.
that. Yeah, I think if more teachers did that, I think that would help change the industry. So often the young teachers are the ones that get the little kids.
Yeah.
But that's where the foundation is laid that either leads to healthy technique or leads to something that's just like, ooh, it can just be a hair off of how they move in a certain way that's going to over time be cumulative and give them those challenges. Because to me, there's nothing more heartbreaking than a 15, 16, 17-year-old who loves dance, but there's a price to pay always. Either that price is something always kind of hurts, or that price is I can't seem to keep getting better. My leg's not getting
Mm.
any higher. I'm not enjoying it more because I'm not feeling the progress. Yeah, I've got a lot of homework and, or now I'm interested in boys and they quit. And we lose so many people who, if it just stayed in their lives, what a change that would be for them and everybody
Yes.
around them.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely an attrition around that age bracket. And I've
Absolutely.
seen it too. And it's heartbreaking as a teacher too, because you've spent, so much time with them and you've
And
seen the
obviously,
progress and sometimes they don't see it,
right.
right? I feel like that happens too.
That can happen
So,
a lot. I mean, you always get your plateaus, but I'm always curious to go, is it a plateau or do they have to unlearn and relearn something to actually go forward?
right, right. Which
And
is why that
therefore,
10-year span is really
yeah,
helpful. So
because
you
then you
can look
go,
back.
oh, it'd be so nice if they didn't have to unlearn something that I inadvertently taught them.
Yeah,
So I've
yeah,
always been the questioner. You could,
yes, yes. So,
that's been a lifelong trade.
yeah. So speaking of which, so there's a couple things I wanted to kind of hone in on there. One is that attrition rate. What do you think we can do to help those teenagers that fall into that category of either it's injury or they just get derailed? What do you think we can do as dance teachers to help them stay on track and find the joy in it really again?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And also as a studio owner, that's an excellent question, right? Where wanting
Yes.
to keep those people. I think number one is to not take the blame or the fault. That sounds a bit negative, but take the responsibility rather than going, oh, that's just teenagers, or oh, that's life, that's their parents, and just say, well, I can't control any of that, so therefore it needs to be a non-issue for me. What can I be responsible for? And provided that, say, it's not an injury where chronic pain is just making it unhappy for them, and that's understandable. I think the reason people keep dancing, so it's rather than looking at why do they leave, say, well, what can we do to keep them there?
Hmm.
And teenagers, I mean, all of us, but teenagers are so much going through a time where they're trying to find themselves. And by that, I mean two things: trying to find themselves and their personal identity of knowing who I am in my body, my relationship with my body, which unfortunately in dance, that's not always a healthy one. And
Right.
also, where do I belong? Like in my friend group. I mean, most parents would know, teachers know that for a 15-year-old, there's nobody more important than their friends right then. So are we making the dance studio, and more specifically, the actual time in the dance class, a community event? And
Mm,
I don't think we often do that. I think we go, oh, well, they're friends and they're chatting to each other out in the change room and they're on the dance team together, and that's enough. It isn't.
mm,
It isn't enough,
mm,
especially when you think of all the dynamics that happen. You could go, oh, look, there's that group of 12 girls and they're always together. Yeah, but you don't know that there's not one or two that are ostracized when they're out in the change room.
right.
So bringing the community idea into the actual dance studio. And again, I'm primarily a ballet teacher. And so much of the time, ballet is seen as an individual pursuit. You're at the bar by
Yep.
yourself, you center work by yourself, you go across the floor, you're by yourself. You might be beside somebody, but you're not really with somebody. And I think that's old school. And it
Right.
doesn't work. It doesn't work for teenagers. It doesn't really work for humans. And ironically, even teaching ballet, I mean, it's most ballets, I mean, the classics anyway, they're all stories, which is all about
Hmm.
relationships. So why are
Hmm.
we playing with that in the dance studio? Why are we not taking that temps levé across the floor combination, but from opposite ones coming together, interacting and going away?
Right.
It,
Yeah, I love
it,
that.
I mean, why not? It's great for choreography and relationship building that actually transmits on stage. But it's more than that. It means they were actually dancing with their friends.
Yes.
And if you're doing the spacing in class and certainly choreography where everyone feels that they're not important like that, but they feel validated and seen, that if you weren't there, we'd miss you, right? So they
Mm,
belong. So if we make it so that the students belong happily in their bodies and belong happily in the community of that class, why
hmm.
would they leave? Because
Yeah.
both aspects of it are so fulfilling.
Yes.
So it kind of
Yes.
it's kind of two branches, if that makes sense. And I can,
Yeah.
dive into either one, but
Yeah.
that's the first framework, is to go, am I happy and confident at home in my body? Does it feel good? Do I trust it? Do I know it? Do I love it? Do I love the experience of being in it? Or am I here just to tame it and make it do things that it doesn't want to do and I feel bad about myself?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
if I feel bad about myself when I do something, I think it's wonderful if a student who feels bad when they do something decides to leave and no longer keep feeling bad. Like, they're smart. They know this isn't healthy for me. But that's about how we're teaching, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right. Yeah. So
are we able
how do
to?
we get that to that space where, well, I think it kind of leads into that topic we discussed a little bit about authority versus dictatorship too. I
Right.
think that plays into this conversation, especially when it comes to the older kids. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience in that?
Absolutely. Well, we may as teachers be an authority in that dance genre, but we cannot be the authority of another person's body. It's our job, I believe, to give them information and guidance to help them to have the understanding of their body and their unique body. So that's number one. Is the word training kind of bothers me because it always has this sense of like, we're going to put you in the rut. It's almost like thinking of training the circus animals, where it's like there's this narrow of you must do this and behave, or there's consequences, there's punishment, or they're only doing the work for the reward. That sort of dictatorship thing that is old school and done a lot in dance world, particularly ballet. It is something that teachers really need to consider, the damage and the fallout and the fact that students would leave from that. So how can we teach them to be their own authority? Well, first of all, remember that you're not the authority. You're simply the guide who's creating experiences to help them to discover the brilliance that their body already has. And then sure, you can help them refine, and you're giving feedback, but the feedback goes both ways. I'm going to ask my students, how does that feel? I'm not going to tell them how it feels. I might say, this is how it feels in my body. What's your experience? Oh, here's an image that works for me, so I feel this efficiently. What's
Mm-hmm.
working for you? So
Mm-hmm.
having authority, I think people misunderstand that as having like control over the class so we can get work done.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if you have the buy-in, the kids are engaged and interested themselves in learning about their body and how it works. They are engaged. There's no control necessary. There just isn't. So when I
Yeah.
think of teaching, I teach a lot of teachers, and I had an experience a couple years ago where their very first question, I asked them, what can I help you with most? And it was all about, how can I control my students? And I'm like, okay, well, first, can we look at why they're out of control? And they're out of control because they're not engaged in what you're offering them. And if
Mm.
you're offering them how to understand their bodies better, and hey, if you do this, you'll get that result. Oh, that is the result they want. Okay, well, if doing pirouettes on point is your goal, here's the steps to help you get there. And won't they get there? I have a little phrase I say, like, get on the bus. Won't they just get on the bus because they want to go where you're taking them? But
I like that.
if they don't know where they want to go, and they don't know that what you're doing right now won't get them there, then again, kids are always taught by their parents, don't talk to strangers, and with that, it would follow, don't get on a bus where you don't know where it's going.
Sure. Sure.
So if kids don't seem cooperative and you're trying to be that dictator and that authority to control it and contain it, I'd go, it's because they don't want to get on the bus. And that's because there's no clarity there for them about where they want to go, and for you communicating to them, we're doing this so you can get there. And then they'll willingly follow your guidance. You're not controlling or disciplining at all, in my belief. Now, I also have to back it up a whole bunch of work in my brain gym work, where I know how to use movement to get them in a learning state. Because sometimes it could just be that the kids they came from school and they're sort of like, when you think of the two hemispheres, they're kind of like popped apart. They're in a bit of a frazzled, stressed state. And all the great guidance in the world, those types of methods still may not work because they're not in the learning state yet. So I have that
Hmm.
background conveniently as well, of course, that I embed.
Could you
But
give us an example of what that might look like? Like when a kid
absolutely.
comes in and you're like, I can tell we
Well,
need to get you into
we
the
need to get you
focused
in there. I
state.
think number one would be, honestly, they always say don't make assumptions, but in this case, I'd say I would assume that my students are somewhat stressed, because the act of learning is stressful. Like it's like not the negative stress, but it is a cumulative effect of even positive stress of growth. So I'm going to assume that they are stressed actually when they come in. So I'm going to
Mhm.
take a few minutes at the beginning of class, not to do a typical dance warm up, or in the case of ballet, going straight to the bar, but to do some movements that will help to integrate the two hemispheres of the brain, help to calm them and take them out of a fight or flight type of stress mode. And there's these little points, for instance, that you can touch here that are the end of the kidney meridian that help to calm the body. We do these movements called hookups, where I'm linking through, and I just take maybe 4 or 5 minutes at the beginning of class to just say, okay, let's just get our brain connected, get our stress lowered. Now we can learn.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
they can
there's
take
specific
themselves
movements.
out of that situation and bring them back into this is where I'm at right here. right
It's like
now,
getting in the
ready
present.
to
Yeah,
go.
absolutely. And you know, I know it's interesting. It's this weird um, dichotomy almost is I think other teachers have always tried to do this where they say, leave your problems at the door, right? You know, when you're coming into dance class, leave your problems outside the door. And yet later they're asking them to really dance and express who they are. Well, you can't have people leave who they are and what's going on in their lives outside the door and then express them to be artistic, connected to who they are. You know, you've separated them. So this is a way to say, bring in who you are, but let's just, we don't need to be in the stress state about it. And now I'm
Mhm.
there in my confident, integrated is the word I like to use, integrated state. And of course I can be expressive rather than that splitting. And again, I think teachers
Mm.
mean to do it where they want them to leave the stress out and bring who you are in,
Mhm.
but that's often not done. Instead, there tends to be a splintering and they show up just as a body
Mm.
and mind
Yeah.
telling your body. And that whole body, mind, spirit, beautiful connection has been segmented and fractured and it doesn't feel good. I think that's another reason people would quit. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel good, mind, body, spirit anymore.
Right. Right. It's almost like they would, it'd be better to tell them, come into class as you are and let's plie the stress away.
Yeah, like use your
Right?
imagery. Like things are melting away, and you can imagine this pool of everything melted, and then we'll use our rendagems to sop it all up, and and then we'll flick it
Toss
all
it
away
out.
or something, and you can just absolutely and say we're going to just leave our happiest, best selves. But it's okay to remember it if we're doing something later that has a yearning and a longing for something you don't have. Like you can bring back the memory of some of that, but it's different bringing back a memory of something than trying to learn when you're busy in that state.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
teenagers in particular, there's so much social stress and social pressures that are going on that again, you might think everything's great, but you don't know that somebody didn't just get snubbed in the change room moments before they walked in.
Right.
And they're not in a state to learn. And when they're not in a state to learn, they're going to be disruptive on some level. But it's like it's not really their fault. So again, I really eliminated the it's my students' fault and I'm blaming the students or the parents and go, I mean, it's honestly, it's maturity to just say, what can I
Sure.
manage? And then only pay attention to that. That's where my power is. What
Yeah.
can I change? And that would be the big one is letting go of all of the, oh, it's just a teenager. I love teaching teenagers. I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Love
I
it.
love having a variety. I feel like it helps me as a teacher to have that capability of having teenagers in one class and then you go and teach the little ones.
Yeah,
So you get a little bit of both in your mix of the day. So um
absolutely. Yeah,
it,
that's a favorite is the variety, the ongoing variety that keeps
yeah.
you having perspective all the time, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. To keep
Yeah.
perspective. Exactly. So that's interesting. So you touched on it just a little bit, but let's talk about the way the traditional ballet classroom has been set up hasn't always been conducive for a learning environment. What are some things that you specifically do or you suggest teachers do to get their students in a place where, yes, they're understanding the mind and body kind of integration, but to maybe kind of flip the switch, if you would, on going from like, I don't really want to be here
Mm.
to, okay, we're engaged now.
And now we're engaged. Yeah. Well, again, teenagers in particular, they want autonomy. Like they want to be kids when things aren't working well and they want mom to come or teacher to come in and solve it and they want their independence, right? So there's sort of that 1 foot in, 1 foot out all the time. So if you're giving them the container of your confidence in how you're guiding them, they feel like that kid part of them feels safe.
Hmm.
Then if you give them personal agency all the time, and one thing that I think teachers do, but they do it in tiny snippets, and I'd encourage them to do it a whole lot more, is choice making. So it's so wonderful to be making a balance at the end of every exercise. Like, why not? Why not work on your balance? Whether it's a demi point, full point perhaps, one leg, or just like, anyway, any balance is great. Okay, well, could you just simply make it that they balance in whatever position they want to? Well, of course you could. There's no reason you can't. But giving students that, okay, here's our Fondo exercise, and I want you to finish in a balance. You can be in any position you like. That being sprinkled in so consistently, so maybe it's not even sprinkled in. It's like the end of every exercise, they get choice about what their body needs most. And you say it like that. What does your body need most? Or what's your personal agenda right now? So they may balance in an attitude devant every time, all day, because they're just going to dig into attitude devant. Or they may do arabesque all day, every day. Or they may be variety and just say, that's up to you to decide based on what you want. So therefore, it starts to be about a balance between teacher goals and student goals. And when you start talking about the student goals and what you want, they are drawn. They're not like made to, but they're drawn to going, oh, my goals matter. Yeah, it's about
Yeah.
you. Yeah, my goals matter. My choices towards my goals, they're for me to take. Oh, and to just slowly be giving them that personal agency to go, this is a dance class that is my gift to all of you, and you will all use it in different ways. And it's
Hmm.
like a toy under the tree that you unwrap at Christmas, and everybody plays with it differently. It's like, it's your body and you know how you want to work with it. Yes, I'm your resource person. So if you got a question, I'm here, ask the question. So that's the other big one. So you're giving them autonomy and personal agency through choice. And it can be as little as a balance or as big as, okay, we're going to work on re-energize. These are the 3 steps, and I'd like you to go take time working with 2 others to create an enchaînement. I mean, that is so brilliant for learning choreography. And if you're doing ballet exams that have re-enchaînements like the RED, you come at it from so many different levels, but it also means that they're making choices. They're creating for themselves.
Yes.
And if I'm actively creating what I need, and I know I get that opportunity, again, I'll be drawn to that. And then in the
Hmm.
case of teenagers and kids, and if maybe I get to create with others, then
Well,
that social element is there as well.
for those who don't know what Frianchement is, why
Oh yeah.
don't you
When
give a
you're putting
little
together,
explanation?
yeah, you can see, if you were to see the word enchaînement, you'd see the word chain in the middle. So it's like a chain of steps, a combination that they've never done before. And often in the ballet world, it's done where we're just giving the names of the steps only. And so they have to really know their vocabulary.
Hmm.
But that Frianchement thing can then feel like a test that they're either passing or failing, because either they knew it or they didn't. Nobody wants to come to a test where there's the potential to fail. That doesn't feel good. And if they like the test because they think they're going to achieve all the time, that's also not healthy, because it's all about product and achievement instead of the process. So working on new
Yes.
combinations and how you're introducing them and making them hopefully a collaborative experience.
Hmm.
Maybe not all the time. I think there's a time, maybe it's 10% of the time, where you go, today, and they know that today I'm going to sit on my behind here and I'm going to give you just words, and you're going to get 3 tries to get it. And the challenge is plugging in to get it quickly. But I don't believe that's how it should be all the time.
Right.
Because,
Right.
but you experience a bit of this and you experience of that. So it's kind of like the buffet. We need to offer a
Yeah.
buffet of learning styles. And I think the old school stuff that you mentioned, outdated, is people following the traditions of how class is taught. And then, so I just want to add one more piece right here, which would be, I was brought up almost exclusively, although not entirely, which was lovely, where I could take an hour-and-a-half class and I would not say a single word to the teacher, to a
Hmm.
peer, ever. You're just here in your body. And I'm like, you're not. You're here to be expressive. If you've got a question, you should feel safe to ask it.
Mm.
Maybe, yeah, you're going to go, the teacher would say, hey, well, hang on, let's try it first, investigate this. And if you still have a question, of course, I'm here for you. But do your own personal investigation a bit first and then ask the question.
Hmm.
But I also think
Yeah.
we as teachers know that we have an inner voice that we're often talking to ourselves while we're doing something. So if I'm doing my plies and I'm saying relax and push or something like that, we have to give students the opportunity to work on their own inner voice.
Hmm.
They also have to work on their outer voice. That's how we know how the inner voice is going. So I love to ask
Yeah.
for feedback. How was that feeling? What were you thinking when you did that? And I do a lot of guest teaching, and I get a lot of blank stares when I say, "What were you
I'm
thinking about when you
sure.
did that?" And they're like going, uh, and they were just thinking of the combination. I'm going, okay, well then on the other side, now that you're confident on the combination, what are other directives of how you're doing something can you really dig into? And
I
that
love
requires
that.
verbalization. And so I think that's the other outdated one, is to assume that we're even going to have a mind body connection. And if you think about it, through the neck, through the voice, but this area of our body is completely locked and blocked.
Hmm.
How are we going to get mind body connected when this is
Yeah.
so?
Interesting.
Does it make for some chaos because all of a sudden there's many people talking because you've let them share with a partner?
No.
Well, I wouldn't call it chaos, but okay, you want to call it chaos. Yeah, but then 2 minutes later, they've all expressed, they rein it back in, and you're rechanneling and reconnecting that energy. It actually brings up the energy in a studio every time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. I could see that completely. Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. I love that. And you know what I think it does too? It makes me think that you're helping, right? When we're teachers in the classroom, we're helping people become the fullness of who they are, right? Because there's so many aspects of dance that just cover, like you're saying, mind, body, soul. But we're helping them learn how to solve problems too, right? And so instead of just doing mindless repetition, like that's what they say, one of the big things that's missing is that kind of peace when children are young. That's why play is so important, because they're actually learning how to solve problems with play, and without the information just being given to them all the time and then regurgitating it, right? And so I
Yeah.
love the way that you're explaining that, because that's really what it makes me think of. It's like, oh, you're saying, hey, well, you're dancing. You should be having this internal dialogue, which is actually helping you solve your problems, and you're kinesthetically aware with your brain as well as your body, your nerves, everything is incorporated then. And how much easier to get your expression into your dance
Well,
that way.
expression would not be then the icing on the cake. I always say that to people. It's
Right.
not the icing on the cake. I'm like, it's the eggs. Like it's the thing that binds it all together. It's a main ingredient. Mind, body, spirit. Why are we separating them to think that somehow we're training them better because they're separated? The It's like 1 + 1 + 1, mind, body, spirit, let's say, does not equal 3. It equals, that's what equals 100, is when they all come together. And so that separation of it often seems like it's easier to just hone in on it. But then if you've honed in for too long and you've separated them, man, is it a big deal to try to get them reconnected. And I
Yeah,
think a
really,
lot
it's
of
like
people struggle with that.
the one, two, three equals one, the one
Yeah, right.
person,
The one, or you
right?
could call it
Yeah.
100. Yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone.
The Trinity.
Yes, there you
Yeah.
go. You put it all together. And so, I see a lot of Facebook threads like, oh, I need help with helping my students with work on their expression. And to me, that goes back to, well, how were you working on the technique? Did you separate it from expression? And
Yeah.
chances are you might have. And that's where to maybe make the switch. It's almost like the going back the 10 years. Go back
Yeah.
and go, if something's not showing up, did I, as a teacher, lay the foundation for it to be separated in the first place?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And
That's already got me thinking. So a lot
yeah.
of this stuff has. So yeah, that's great.
And
Well,
so it makes your job
this is,
easier. Yeah. Mhm.
yes, yes. Well, I want to wrap up this section, which is kind of geared more towards the older student. But why don't you tell us a little bit about just what your offer is with the Radiant Dance Teacher, and let our audience know about that.
Wonderful. Okay. So I have an offer for all of those of you listening right now or at any time. I did a workshop last year in 2023 that I entitled Return to Radiance. And it is a 2-hour workshop with a lovely little PDF that you get with it that can be a nice resource that will help you to look at your teaching to see how you are perhaps getting drained. So it's sort of like to prevent burnout or to help recover from burnout. And a lot of dance teachers, over say 45 years old and been doing it 20 years or whatever, They talk about burnout, and their summer was their time to recharge, and then they burn out all year, and then they recharge. And it's an ongoing cycle that's really unhealthy for them. But also, when you just mentioned about the separation, you could also look at it as saying, am I pouring into my students or am I drawing out of my students? If all my teaching methods are just pouring in and I'm giving, 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 it's exhausting and going to drain. So a lot of these tips are about how to have the reciprocation from the students. So really you're drawing out, which is actually personal agency and collaboration. So I think it'll make a lot of sense. That's my gift to you, is that 2-hour workshop, then the source PDF that you can follow. And it will maybe challenge a few of your ideas about teaching, but they are all there for you to make it healthier for both of you. Nobody gets burned out as a teacher, and students stay because they are, in a sense, also not getting burnt out.
Yeah,
So I hope we
absolutely,
take
because that does
advantage of it.
happen for sure, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Mariah-Jane. It's been a pleasure to have you here and being on the Confident Dance Teacher. And hopefully that is building everybody's confidence as they're listening to this and going, oh, yeah, that would make so much sense to bring it into the
You
classroom.
can
So,
do it. You can
yes,
do it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.